As usual, another great guest, but a quick diversion. You'll notice that our full name is the Marketplace for Health, Wealth, and Freedom. Well, let's talk about your health for a moment. If you'd like to escape from the stranglehold of insurance and be able to see alternative doctors or go across state lines for care, then you definitely need to take a look at patientempowerment.mpb.health and see if that's the fix you've been looking for. Now, let's get back to the show.
Welcome, folks, to Freedom Hub's weekly webinar. I'm Charlie Froman, now with my correct name below Jeff Cantor Zoom. Thanks, Jeff. Jeff is recovering nicely. He is back on board with Freedom Hub. I'm uploading the videos to YouTube, Rumble, Brighteon, BitChute, maybe not so much more. It's really cool. There's all these new video platforms, and some of them are really useful in terms of not censoring, but they have problems raising money to get bandwidth. And so, we'll be free of YouTube's censoring nonsense at some point. Meanwhile, I do have a co-host, Jim Graypeck, a documentarian, a biofeedback healer, an entrepreneur behind Pavilion, which is the Epcot's original vision venture to really create exciting primary care integrative therapies around the world. Really exciting stuff. Jim, I hear you have a freedom minute you want to share. Is that
Freedom
true?
minute. Yeah, I thought with all the talk, more talk these days, we're hearing about, we need to mask for the greater good. It's going to protect others. And the greater good comes up a lot. And I remember that years ago from not only Nazi Germany, but Ayn Rand's book, a number of her books, talking about Americanism or individualism versus collectivism or communism or tyranny, fascism. There are many words for it. So I wanted to just bring that up, a couple of quick points, and that is, we're told this is for the greater good, yet what is the greater good really? The greatest good for the greatest number is not a moral code. It's one of the most vicious slogans ever foisted on humanity. It has no concrete specific meaning. There's no way to interpret it benevolently, but a great many ways to turn it to justify very heinous actions. So what is the definition of the good in the slogan? Well, it's none except what is good for the greatest number. And a question, and I actually interviewed, we have a film that just came out. I was working on The Planet, Tzaddik, you might know of this, Planet Lockdown. A documentary was just released this week. And one of the people in there that was interviewed is Vera, who was a Holocaust survivor. And she said, who gets to decide what the greater good is? I mean, did they ask us? Are we voting on it? No, we're not. And in Germany, I mean, a lot of people were killed. They said it's going to be good for the Jews, for example. If we get rid of them, it's going to make life better. Did it? No, because the good isn't determined by counting numbers, and it's not achieved by the sacrifice of anyone to anyone. So basically, only on the basis of individual rights can any good, public or private, be defined and achieved. Only when each person is free to exist for their own sake, neither sacrificing others nor being sacrificed, can we each then work, are we each free to work for the greater good and really to achieve for ourselves and for society. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up. The word inalienable really means that. It doesn't mean you have rights, your rights are there except in a health emergency, for example, or except on every other Tuesday. So there's no middle of the road here. Individualism and collectivism are completely opposite. So one leads to freedom, justice, and prosperity, which we are working towards. The other to slavery, horror, death, and destruction. So I just wanted to share that moment with you today before our speaker got started. Thank you.
Jim, I'm sorry, I missed that. What?
Missed what?
Sorry, kidding. So, and by coincidence, what you said happens to be one of the slogans for our website. the marketplace for health, wealth, and freedom. And if you're looking at my shared screen, you'll see a picture of Tzaddik HaNachash. And Tzaddik, I'm sure you'll correct my pronunciation, as you probably have to a lot of times when you meet people and they see your name. And Tzaddik was referred to me by Freedom Hub's marketer, Joe Stoffaker, or Stoffacher, or Stoffauke, if you speak Deutsch. And he said, you got to have Tzaddik on. He's really one of those actual boots on the ground freedom activist types. Because let's face it, Jim, a lot of us are couch warriors on Facebook. And, you know, for 3 decades, I've been lobbying in DC and in my state capital. But, you know, that's an intimidating thing for a lot of folks. And a lot of people forced into activism by a tragedy in their family show up at rallies. Tzaddik, though, has a unique project, and I'll let him discuss it. But when we were on the phone or Zoom, he was showing me on the map his walking trail from Sedona, I believe, in Arizona, down through the deserts across the border into Mexico. And wow, what guts. And he has an inclusive approach to this whole activism thing. And that's important, folks. We can't do it in tribes. We have to figure out how to bring us all together to figure this thing out, because things are getting scarier. You mentioned planet lockdown, Jim. You know, you got to be naive if you think, you know, England's declaration of ending the COVID emergency orders is gonna, you know, end this pandemic. The Great Reset folks want to exploit the fear to, you know, take a bite out of freedom and centralize control even more than it is now. That's just the way power corrupts, Lord Acton. And so, Tzaddik, tell us who you are, what you're up to, how we can work with you. And let's, Jim, not forget that there is a Health Freedom Rally this Sunday in DC.
Yep.
And I've got my National Health Federation monthly webinar tomorrow at noon with some big stuff. But Tzaddik, people are noticing you. Tell us why.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, both Jim, to meet you today, and it's been good to be in conversation. And I guess shortly, like where I'll begin is 16 years ago, I founded a global peace organization. So for the last 20 some years, I've been doing international global peace work. Whether that's interfaith work, whether it's dealing with national and political policies, so forth and so on, or bringing it down to the interpersonal peace work of how do we get along with each other and how do we get along with our inner nature. And that's what I've dedicated my life to. So for the last 16 years under the banner of Earthwalk, we've been teaching what we call integrative planetary wellness. It's a way of our trying to educate the world what we think peace consists of. So personal, social, environmental, and integral health and wellness are what we call the 4 pillars of integrative planetary wellness. And when we learn how to bring wellness into each of those arenas and integrate them, that is what a world in peace looks like, where we're taking care of ourselves, we're taking care of each other, and we're taking care of the planet, and learning how to weave that together as a basic part of our global culture. So that's sort of my background. Future forward to what I call Coronaville, okay? When the lockdown started happening, when masks were being introduced, all of this stuff back in 2020. Being in the left side of politics just by nature.
It's a deep, sorry to interrupt, but because of the latency in your signal, you may want to stop your video and just speak, if that makes sense. Try that, see how that works better.
Sure.
Just stop your video.
And what I'll, let me
And you
see.
keep speaking.
Yeah, what I'll actually try to do is see if I can go to a better patient here. And so being in the left, I think as we've all been witnessing, a lot of the left side of politics has been following the narrative of, as Jim was talking about, the collective good, the greater good, and we need to mask up, we need to vaccinate, we need to do all that stuff. And so I found myself pretty alone in that community. Even though this is the community that I had been calling home. I'm going to try to turn my video back on again because I think I might be in a better spot for you guys now. Yeah, I found myself in an environment where people were not thinking the way that I was thinking as far as what I was seeing. And I began to see holes in the narrative. I began to see things that just were not adding up. And finally, in this last year, on September 6th, I put, just to test the waters, just to see like how people would respond, I put a post out on just on my own Facebook page and seeing where people were. And I asked who would be interested in working with me to write and pass a health and medical freedom amendment to the United States Constitution. And I got a lot of response from that. And then 3 days later, we launched a Facebook page. We founded the Medical Freedom Protectors. In 7 weeks, we grew to about 9,000 people on our page and a leadership team of about 70 people. It grew really quickly. And I started writing letters of exemption for people, medical, religious, and legal, because I'm a holistic and energy alignment doctor, and I'm also a spiritual minister. So I started writing a lot of those letters and really diving deep into the entire health and medical freedom movement. There came a critical point, kind of speaking, Jim, to what you were talking about before with regards to the masks. I ended up flying out to Sacramento to attend the COVID conference with Dr. Henry Ely, David Martin, a bunch of others. And on my way out there, I chose to put, my actions behind what I was saying. And I had my exemption letters in hand and ended up getting kicked off of airplanes, ended up getting detained by the TSA, all sorts of things, simply because I was choosing not to comply to what I believe are unconstitutional mandates and regulations being enforced through the TSA, what have you. And currently next week, I'm actually going to be having an informal hearing with the TSA where they fined me for refusal to wear a mask and to comply with those regulations. And I'm actually countersuing them for violation of the United States Constitution for having me miss 2 flights. I was withheld in the airport for 3 days, all sorts of things. And so anyway, I share all of that as a background just to say, I started in the global peace movement. I got really clear that we're not going to have a world of peace if we don't have healthy relationship with how we're able to monitor what goes in and out of our bodies and our own medical choices. That, I think paramount to creating a global culture of peace is sovereignty. And if I can't have a say and control over what goes into my body, and I'm living in a culture that's coercing me to act and behave and be a certain way as far as my medical choices go, that is a huge strike against the possibility of ever creating a global culture of peace. So for me, it became paramount for us to dive into the conversation of health freedom. That said, in diving into this, I also got really clear that the health freedom movement alone is not going to win this. Meaning, from my perspective, we're dealing with the largest mafia on the earth, you know, what I would call the medical conglomerates. You know, in the 60s, we had the military industrial complex. We now have the medical industrial complex, conjoined with, you know, technocrats, so forth and so on. And so what we're dealing with right now, if we're to battle that, if you will, we're to respond to that with just the force of the health freedom movement, I don't think we're going to make it. I don't think that we will be successful. And so after having conversations with my team and other leaders, we then decided to take the next step and found what we call Universal Freedom Alliance. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is share my screen here and kind of, while we're talking, give a little bit of a tour. As you can kind of see here, this is, wrong direction. This is our website, earthwalkunited.org. We have a bunch of different things, like as you can see, you know, we have events that are whole person events that are focused on how to be a integrative planetary citizen, how to, you know, bring peace into the field of economics, how to bring that into learning, how to bring that into politics, so forth and so on. And we have a lot of programs. But this last year, we launched our freedom programs. And where I want to bring you really quickly is, if you look at the Get Involved, we come over here to the Universal Freedom Alliance. And so what I got clear on was that we needed to build something that united all the fronts of freedom. It wasn't going to work if all we did was come from the angle of being against the mandates as our sole response. It needed to be bigger than that. And so that's what we've been focusing on, is how do we get from where we are, where we've got the political freedom movement, we have the economic freedom movement, we have environmental freedom movement, we've got sexual freedom, we've got health freedom, but the parts aren't really talking. And in fact, oftentimes they are antagonistic towards one another. And so part of the challenge as well is getting those different parts to talk and to say, oh, wait a second, we say we're fighting for the same thing, just in a different arena of life, but yet we're not supporting each other. And why are we not supporting each other? And I believe oftentimes why we're not supporting each other is because of the narrative that we're being told by mainstream media, so forth and so on. And so we're working to lay the groundwork for that. So the way that the Universal Freedom Alliance works is individuals, organizations, businesses, and institutions can join and become a part of this Universal Freedom Alliance to create that unified front to address what it is that is going on. There's 2 steps to doing that. The first is, you know, clicking here and signing the pledge. We're actually about to bifurcate this. So the pledge information that you're seeing here is more going to be going towards like team members and committee members. We're also going to have more of a generic pledge for everyone to sign. So like where their name can be seen as someone who's taking the freedom pledge, who's joining the global freedom effort to have a unified front, so forth and so on. And then after that, the way that we're working it is because we are a freedom movement, everything is free. And what I want to clarify by that, most people don't know this. I'm trying, hold on one second. Trying to get back to the screen that I just was. Pardon me one second. Okay. Is that everything is free. So what that means is, can you see my screen still, or did it disappear?
It disappeared. And while you refined it, how has that response been to people signing the pledge and joining you?
So the invitation to people worldwide was literally officially launched this last week. So far our reception has been great, but like literally this is hot off the press. Next week is going to be our first Universal Freedom Alliance member meeting. So far, it's just Earthwalk has been constructing the foundation of it, the base of it, and it's just this next week where we're going to be having our first Universal Freedom Alliance member meeting. So that is where like leaders from different organizations and or representatives from different organizations are sending their people to be a part of that membership meeting, because what we're going to be talking about at that meeting is how to do all the things that that I'm talking about. So like meaning, and here, let me get back to my, I think I figured it out now.
And after you finish speaking, when we go to Q&A, if you wouldn't mind copying and pasting into the chat the link for the pledge. We might as well get some folks to sign up today, right?
Great. Yeah. And it's a really exciting time, because like from my, like this is the beginning. Like our intention, as mentioned, is to unite all the fronts of freedom and to create what I'm calling the movement of movements. One of my mentors, Rennie Davis, you may or may not remember the name. He was one of the Chicago Seven. He was the one who organized the largest consortium of peace organizations in the United States during the 60s. And so he passed away this last year. But up until that point, he had been my mentor and was working with me for this very end, because we had seen that really the only way that we're going to remove ourselves from what I might call the global slavery system, where we're not living in a sovereign unity system, is to create that movement of movements, is to create a global coalition of organizations and businesses who are working together to create a free society. And one of the things I like to talk about that I think is missed oftentimes when we talk about a free society is most people don't know this, but the origin for the word free is an Indo-European root, and it literally means to love. And so a free society is actually a loving society. It's a society where we love and respect one another. In American terms, that would be a society where there is liberty and justice for all. A society where all of our rights are honored and respected. The systems of distribution of power, voice, vote, and resources are distributed in a way that that is loving and respectful for all. So I want to be clear, like when we talk about a free society, it's not free to do whatever you want. We actually believe that's a misnomer. A free society is a loving society. A free society is when I'm building a business, I'm building that business in a way that's honoring all my relations. Or when we're building our economic system, in a way that's honoring all of our relations. Or in the realm of sexuality, we're going into that realm in a way that's honoring all of our relations. And that is a free society. The concept of free for all, I actually believe is not in alignment with the original intention of that word. Because if you think of the word freedom, it comes from the concept of to not be shackled. And when we're not shackled in relationship, like when we make agreements with one another, that's not enslaving me and is not enslaving you, that is a free relationship, AKA it's a loving relationship where the relationship is based in mutual love and respect, and where your needs are honored, my needs are honored, and we're truly creating a sovereign society. So that's sort of like the larger view of what we're working to create is a society that works for all. In the journey towards that, we're developing a number of mechanisms to support people and, to get there. So the Universal Freedom Alliance is one mechanism. Another mechanism is the Universal Freedom Marketplace. So beyond just having people who are members to help build the Universal Freedom Alliance, we also want to have a place for free businesses to be featured, to be seen, and for people to shop at that. Again, this is something we launched this week. We already have businesses who have signed up, and we're about to create a whole interface here. But basically, the way that this is going to work is, as a business, if you come in, we're going to go through a whole process with you. You take the Freedom Pledge, you live up to that. We are then working to develop certifications. So where you can actually get kind of like an organic certification, you would get a political freedom seal or an environmental freedom seal or a health freedom seal, where your business would be recognized for the efforts that it's doing to maintain an environment of freedom with your products, with your customers, and with your employees. And so, that's nothing. And the last thing that I want to share, and I think this is sort of the high level highlight that you had presented to your audience as far as like what this interview is about, was the journey to freedom. So we created an 8.625-year-long plan to bring the world to peace by June 21st, 2030. Some of our allies and friends joke with us and say that we've created the countermeasure to what's the agenda 2030?
Excellent.
Yeah, we've created the countermeasure. and that, basically a world of peace in our cosmology is synonymous to a world of freedom. A free dome, meaning a loving society, is the same as a world of peace. And so we've created 10 stages to get there, and they all go through different places, different concepts of preparing us to live in that more loving society. And the one that's next, that's coming up, is what we call the Journey to Freedom. It is a 33-day journey, and to get to this, you can go to our main page, earthwalkunited.org, and click on that link. And as you can see, the ticker looks like it's a little off, but in 57 days, on March 19th and 20th, we're having the opening ceremonies for that event. It's going to be a worldwide event. I'm not going to go too much into details right now because I've already been talking a while, but in short, we're going to have events all over the world, with a hub event just south of Sedona, Arizona, at Bell Rock. It's the largest bell on Earth. And what we're going to be doing is creating a ring around the bell. So holding hands to create what we call a ring of freedom. It'll take thousands of people holding hands. And with that opening event, we're going to launch the 33-day journey to freedom. During that event, as Charles was sharing, we're inviting global freedom leaders to join us. We're averaging about 20 miles a day. And we're starting from, here, I'll pull the map up really quickly. We're starting from right here, Bell Rock, it's in Sedona, traversing for about 13 days to the border with Mexico. We're inviting people to bring roller skates, to bring bicycles, to bring, scooters, skateboards. We're having fun. And what we're wanting to do is actually to create a really epic scene. We want to draw a lot of attention to the freedom movement. At that point, we're actually going to give all of our, like our bicycles and all that stuff to our support team. They're going to drive it over to Nogales, but we're going to cross the border. And for 6 days, we're going to walk through trails where a lot of migrants oftentimes die in their journey to freedom in the scorching heat in the middle of the summer. And during that time, we're going to be honoring those who have died in their journey to freedom, reading names of families who've been separated at the border, and then re-emerging in Nogales, coming up to Tucson, and then all the way to Phoenix, and landing at their state capital at the Liberty Bell, and then ringing the bell of freedom and having a closing event. And so it's a 592-mile journey. We have a number of different freedom leaders who have said that they're going to be coming and joining us and being a part of that journey, building the energy. So it's not just me walking for freedom. The invitation, this is the collective journey for freedom. The invitation is for people to come out and to join me and to walk for freedom as a movement. And, you know, I jokingly refer to Forrest Gump, that hopefully by the time we hit Phoenix, we're going to have tens of thousands, if not more, walking and skateboarding and roller skating for freedom with me.
No, that's outstanding, Tzaddik. And if you want to go to Q&A, we could get the participants asking questions. And so my question is on the alliance challenge, Tzaddik, that you correctly described. It is tough to really coalesce when there are differences, but each of us finds opportunities here and there. And in Health Freedom, an interesting alliance has started with one of the most conservative Republicans in the House, Louis Gohmert, a former judge who's running for Attorney General in Texas now. And he introduced the vaccine choice bill for my client, National Health Federation, and it's working with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the iconic toxins lawyer at Children's Health Defense, who's turning out to be one of the best bridge builders that we need to build this alliance. And Kennedy wrote a really wonderful letter to Congressman Gohmert that touched Gohmert. And keep in mind, Gohmert substitutes for Sean Hannity on Fox Radio. And Gohmert was so touched that he wrote a letter back to Kennedy. And while health freedom isn't the only issue around this needed alliance, it does seem to be at least one galvanizing issue that can bring the alliance together. Because if we can get Gohmert, who doesn't have every issue perfectly aligned with this alliance you're building, and RFK, who has some environmental views that a lot of folks maybe can't get on board with, but a lot of them people can. If they can build this alliance, I think, you know, Naomi Wolf is another who's part of this solution and growing alliance. So that's one thing, you know, these interesting alliances between people that you wouldn't expect to be working together, number one. Number two, you mentioned the marketplace for people in this alliance. Conscious capitalism is one area on the right that may be able to join this alliance too. I helped John Mackey at Whole Foods found conscious capitalism in the 2000s. And that's basically working for good. So it's not just working for profit, but working for good. There are a number of areas where I think we could, you know, bring folks from the right and the left, the libertarians, progressives, whatever, transpartisan is another label that people use for this needed alliance. And finally, you bring up a topic folks want to ask about, you know, what is the meaning of, what is the root of freedom? If you Google liberty and ancient cultures, the Vedas, every culture has it. Lao Tzu, Taoism has great stuff, quotes on what freedom really is. Libertas, the Latin word. Knock would describe it as growing your sovereignty in the individual sphere against the coercive sphere. That's a worthwhile topic having. What is freedom? Is it anything goes? Is it personal responsibility? You're responsible to fellow man. Even Adam Smith had some stuff in his work that really is more expansive than what you would think. So that's my thought. Jim Grapek, co-host, do you want to start off the questions? Unless Tzaddik, you want to respond to what I just said?
Well, just really quickly, just to say that this for me is where it's at. Like we can be in one camp and fight for this level of freedom in this arena, and that's great. And we'll get a certain point with that. We'll make some strides and we'll move forward. But I don't think it's until we learn to reach across the quote unquote aisle and beyond just the aisle, but to reach, throughout society and start to build all of those bridges, that it's not until we do that we're going to propel ourselves forward in a really great way. I think for me, this is where I actually get really excited to learn where we can work with John Mackey. My former partner, she was the editor-in-chief for Conscious Company magazine. So I was very involved in that world as well. And I think that's where it's at, is like getting these different parts to talk. And just on a side note, we are working with Children's Health Defense, and they are joining the Universal Freedom Alliance. And we are looking to have Bobby Kennedy be a speaker at our closing events of the Journey to Freedom.
That's great. And I also worked with Dr. Ely, whom you mentioned. I helped him form an economics panel from his recent work. So yeah, small world, we're working with the same people. Jim, do you have a question or comment? And then we'll go to David Demers. You can unmute yourself. So David, why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Thank you, Charles. Tzaddik, knowing that free markets are both social and economic, would you support the notion that a free market society is a loving society?
Yeah, I would completely support that notion. I think that's the essence. And one of the 13 core components to Earthwalk's global platform is what we call integrative economics. And what that means is our economic system is based, what we actually call that is based in love. So where a lot of different currencies are based in, let's say, gold, or they're based in this, or they're based in that, ours is based in our capacity to be good to one another. And so what we call that is conscious connection or conscious relationship. And that is actually the foundation of a free society, that it's not the gold that we mine out of a mountain or the papers that we get from a tree, but it's actually on the agreements that we make with one another. It's on the ability to trust the handshake that we have with one another. It's the ability to trust the society that we're co-creating with one another. So that's what we say is the foundation for an integrative economic society, is unconscious connection. And that conscious connection is the cornerstone to the exchange of all goods and services within that free market.
Did
I answer your question? Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
That raises another guest we had, Adam Kokesh, a year ago, or maybe it was 2 years, I can't remember. He ran for Libertarian presidential candidate. He lost. He got to start as a Iraq War vet, Iraq War Veterans for Liberty or something. And he's confrontational. So he believes in earned media, getting arrested, for example, to make his point. And he presented on localism, which I think is one unifying tenet for this alliance, in that locally you could do whatever you want. Communes are great. I got into Kundalini Yoga, which I teach, and a lot of folks, even libertarians, right wingers, love going into a group just to feel that aspect of humanity. There's something important to this human experience from the group dynamic. And when you have a more free market, liberty tolerant center, that allows for experimentation locally a little bit more easy. And Maine does a good job with that. They have a lot of local rights through their, I forget what they're called, for local food movement, et cetera. So localism, have you heard, Tzaddik, has that been a topic that's come up with your group?
I think in general, this is actually a common question that's sent my way is, like, are you a globalist, or, like, what's your relationship? Like, if you're talking about a global culture piece, how does it relate to local economy? And how do then all the pieces work together? And one, I just want to say that it's a very complex conversation. And part of the reason why we are building the Universal Freedom Alliance as one of the alliances that we're building is because from my perspective, the solutions to this aren't something that any one organization is going to find. It's not a solution any one nation state is going to find. These are the kind of solutions that I believe take multiple angles coming together to produce. And so, as I had mentioned earlier, and I know this is somewhat tangential, but just gonna, bring it together. As I mentioned earlier, this entire platform, the 8.625-year-long plan to bring the world to peace, it's called this, the 10 stages to freedom, which we call it the greatest show on earth, which is the return to love. That's our official title for the 8.625-year-long plan. And the last stage is called signing and sealing the deal to freedom. And one end of that is we're putting together committees to put together what we are envisioning as a universal covenant for the entire planet that we're currently calling the Universal Covenant of Interdependence. And kind of going a little bit back to what Jim was talking about before, I actually believe this is what unifies the conversation of independence and collectivism, the individualism and collectivism. That interdependence actually bridges those seemingly divergent places into something that works well together. So you're honoring the uniqueness of every individual, you're honoring the power of the collective, and creating a conversation that then weaves them together as one. And so within that process, where in a lot of government systems right now, I'm born into the United States. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. No one ever asked me if I agreed with the basic covenant of law with Tucson. No one ever asked me if I agreed with the basic covenant with the state of Arizona, or the county of Pima, or the United States. No one ever asked me that. It was, we live in a culture, I actually believe it's on a political level, it's somewhat of a rape culture. We're not asked, it's not consensual. And so what we're wanting to do is to shift that to where we do have agreements that in each generation, as we're developing, where we are asked are these the collective agreements that work for you? But at the same time, and this is kind of coming back to what you're saying, is at the same time making sure it's local. So where we also want to have the collective agreement as a huge part of this entire process is ensuring that you as well, Charles Frohman, did I pronounce it right?
Yep.
You have your own sovereignty papers, meaning you have your own covenant with your universe. I have my, and what we want to do is work with the collective to create their own, because some of us have worked on that, but where we have a society where you have your own individual covenant, you then have your collective covenant with your local community, you have your collective covenant, but it's something where you're not just thrown into and expected to be a part of, but that there's a more consensual nature to all of that. So
Hey, I just want to jump in because you were saying kind of bringing collectivism. It sounded like individual together, and I want to say no. The word is community, not a collectivism approach. You can't bring them together, but you can use the individual and connect with the communities to do what you're talking about. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have lots of smart people having grammar fights on language. We all know. I'm thinking of people in particular, yogi friends, consultants, who really will just nail you on every word you use, and they're right in many respects, because there's a lot of energy behind communication. In the beginning, there was the word, right? And I wanted also to ask you, Tzaddik, about your healing and spiritual practices that got you involved with the exemptions. Jim is a biofeedback healer. I teach Kundalini Yoga, which is powerful. Tell us about your healing and spiritual work. I'm sure Jim will want to comment.
Yeah. Short end, I was trained and groomed to become a rabbi from a very young age. I went to Columbia University and the Jewish Theological Seminary and studied to become a rabbi. And then 3.5 years into that journey, after living in the West Bank and seeing a lot of violence that my people were perpetrating upon another group of people, I began to question a lot. And I left the Jewish Theological Seminary. I went and trained and became a Kundalini Yoga teacher. I went to holistic body therapy school.
Hold on. That's very cool. Do you have a spiritual Kundalini Yoga name?
Well, with Tzaddik, I never, they never thought to give it, because Tzaddik, it's interesting. Tzaddik is actually the Hebrew version of the word seek.
No kidding. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm Amar Atma. That's my
Amar Atma.
Yeah, you submit your numerology and they give you a Kundalini Yoga name. It's fun.
Yeah. I studied with Diyal Singh Khalsa and Guru Ravi were my two primary teachers who trained me. And then I ended up branching off and creating my own strand of yoga. I merged Hebrew mysticism with Kundalini Yoga and created what I called Atzilut Yoga.
That sounds very cool.
Then I studied for about 15 years with indigenous shamans and medicine men and women throughout the Americas, and studied with Alberto Villoldo, the Four Winds, Peruvian shamanism, pretty in depth. And what I would say is, in a deep level, the work that I do at this point is really an expression of that I consider myself a planetary shaman, that the work that we do is like, I look at all the systems of the world, and that this game is just about how do we figure out how to bring more healing into all of those arenas, and just addressing where we're sick and where we need medicine.
Talk about sadhana, daily practice. You walk. You would probably agree with the premise that if you want to be neutral and responsive instead of reactive, you got to do something daily, to work on your pranayama breath, get this body ramped up to operate as you and God decided you want to do in this lifetime. Do you have a daily sort of routine? Do you agree with that kind of what I just said?
Yeah. So I'm a little different than most people, I would say, in many regards, but I tell people I have one practice. And that practice is to love. Like, that is my only practice. One of the 13 core components in Earthwalk is what we call the Compass Project. And our core technology is called the Compass of Life, where it breaks down time, space, attention, intention, and dimension, and how to navigate those 4 arenas in order to create a moment of unification in each moment, where we feel connected with all of life. So for me, I'm just constantly asking the question, what is the most loving right now? And I listen and listen and I listen and I listen and I ask, okay, am I supposed to be going on a walk right now? Am I supposed to be doing breath work right now? Do I need to like sit in meditation? What is the medicine? But for me, when I've tried to grind it down to like, I'm going to do this every day and this every day, that typically only lasts for seasons. It doesn't last a lifetime for me. So, you know, like right now I have my apple cider vinegar blend with lemon juice and cayenne and turmeric and cinnamon and all that stuff. I do go for daily walks out into nature. I do have a practice of sitting for 33 minutes a day and 33 seconds just for fun. That's my daily practice. And we actually also have recently started up a daily freedom session where I'm meditating with people online every day. And that's something that, you know, people can find out about as well.
I would love to do
Well-
that with you. Jim, you're into this. Give us your daily routine and respond to Tzaddik. You're a
Daily
karate
routine.
man.
Yeah, martial arts, qigong. That I kind of like meditation and movement myself. So I'm working with that, with the 4 directions, bringing in the energy, sending out the love. I mean, hey, we gotta love this guy, right? I mean, that's what he's about. I mean, it's great. I love it. Yeah, I had my apple cider vinegar mix earlier. You know, it's like, what else? Yeah, what else? Everything's. It's good. It's great to just be, you know, the Eckhart Tolle, I don't know how you pronounce his name, but it's being present in the moment, you know, having that love. How can I interact with the world better? And it sounds like, wow, I'm really impressed with what you're doing out there. I kind of feel like, I thought my project was big. You must have a team, or you need a good sized team, right, to support what you're doing. You're moving around there. So yeah. And that's great. I mean, that's great. And Charlie, you said earlier something about, wow, they've got to have like strong guts to do that. And I was thinking strong legs, maybe. You know? But yeah, so that's it. Yeah, and little yoga, stretching. But I'm a martial arts guy, you know, for my spirit.
How is profanity on this stage? Can I share something?
I don't know. Is YouTube okay with that? I don't care.
Yeah, no, if it's the only bad word is like, oh, I won't even say it. Begins with a V. So whatever you want to talk about.
Right. Well, because I was laughing because when you're talking about Eckhart Tolle, I have been working on a book project called Fuck the Now. A playful and intimate approach to spirituality is the subheader. And it's actually an acronym for forgiveness, understanding, compassion, and kindness. That from my perspective, it's impossible to not be in this current moment. We're always in this moment, whether we're thinking ahead or we're thinking about what has happened. And we're creating physiological states within ourselves as a result of our thinking. No matter what, we're actually still here. It's impossible to not be here. And so that got me thinking of, well, if that's true, that it's impossible to not be here, we are always here. What is the thing that is really important? And from my perspective, it's how we are here. So when we go into thoughts about the future, how are we doing that? When we go into our past, or if we're here in our current environment, how do we go there? If we're shamanically journeying, how do we go there? And for me, it came down to those 4 basic principles of forgiveness, understanding, compassion, and kindness. That no matter which direction we go, it's more for me, what are we carrying in our heart? And what is the lens at which we are approaching whatever this here now moment is presenting?
You know, one thing quick, as you guys look at my screen, join us tomorrow at noon. National Health Federation is the oldest health freedom organization in the world. So I'm sort of an umbrella lobbyist with a lot of experts in all the fields, and you're going to want to hear about our second bill in Congress. I mentioned Gohmert's bill for a national exemption from mandates. We're introducing a bill to put liability on pharma for their vaccine injuries. We're going to exploit the 5G pause on flying to get Congress to focus on the wireless effects on everyone else. We're going to try to expand health plans to allow more supplement deductibility. But you know, if you have anything else to share, you know, let me know. I'll also share here, Steve Kirsch has the best Substack on the COVID nonsense. He's a Democrat, multimillionaire tech tycoon who decided to give something back to humanity. So now he's hated by all his friends because every day he has a team of scientists that pick apart the narrative. It is the best Substack. I'll put that. And this is an advertisement for Sunday's protest with all the usual suspects, Sunday in DC at the Washington Monument, to protest the mandates. And I guess Tzaddik would say they should broaden it to bring in every other freedom person for this alliance that's needed. We're running out of time here. We have a minute left. Thanks everyone for joining. Let me look clearly here to see who is next week's guest, and I'll give Tzaddik the final word. Let's see here, noon. It's Professor Ebeling on an article he wrote on teaching Austrian economics to the Austrian prince 100 years ago. Too few folks know this, but before the First World War, Austria was really using that Vienna feel of culture to grow into a fairly tolerant republic, despite being sort of an empire with a lot of ethnic groups that were pulled into the empire, and that, of course, would lead into World War I. They would have to separate at some point. Ebeling was one of those econ folks that Dr. H had me bring into for one of Henry Ely's webinars. So, you know, strange alliances. He's here next week, same time, noon Eastern. Jim, you want to say a last word before Tzaddik says goodbye?
No, we can talk afterwards. I was going to bring up the attributes of the heart, the Wingmakers project from years ago, but we can continue. It was great. No, thank you.
It was Tzaddik. And one last time, tell folks how they can reach you and why.
Yeah, really, well, first, earthwalkunited.org. And one last thing that I would say is, you know, one of the things that we say constantly at Earthwalk is it takes a global village to create a global culture of peace, that it takes all of us. It's not something that any one organization or nation state does. We have to come together. So, you know, if anything of what we've talked about this morning appeals to you, please find us. We'd love to have you join our alliance and any of our teams.
So what about your wealth? If your money could actually talk to you, would you listen to it? Well, with the DNA Network Academy, your money actually can talk to you. And it's going to tell you just what it told this client. This family had over 24 debts, mortgages, car loans, the works. They were on track to take 20 years to pay it all off and instead did it in 8.5. Plus, they did it without refinancing, making more money, or even changing their lifestyle. So find out for yourself with a free analysis that is completely confidential. No personal information, no social security numbers, no credit checks, none of that nonsense. But what is exciting is that the outcome of that report you receive is a guaranteed outcome for you. To get that report, head on over to bit.ly/debt to wealth. You will arrive at this simple form. Fill it in as simple as lender number 1 and credit card number 2. What really matters is the accuracy of your numbers. You'll be able to see that if instead of 20 years or whatever your number is, that you may actually be out of debt and on your way to wealth in as little as 6.3 years like this client.